So, there's a rumor going around that there's an OG God of War series remaster on the way, a package that endeavors to remaster either the main trilogy of Greek games or possibly the entire 6-game saga. I don't know much about this other than the fact that it may be happening, and that's for one very good reason. Nothing's officially been announced, and we may not even know if it's happening officially, hence why I haven't mentioned it up until now. It reminds me of this one bit from The Phantom Menace.
No need to report that to him until we have something to report.
But it has got me thinking, you know, remasters get a bad rep for good reason. To paraphrase Yahtzee Croshaw, they want the clout of full remakes while only putting in half the effort, but there are examples of good remasters out there. The definition of a remaster, at least when it comes to gaming, is of course basically throwing a fresh coat of paint over an existing game without really changing the core fundamentals. Sometimes it'll just be a graphical upgrade or engine upgrade, and sometimes they'll also add quality of life features. Sometimes they'll also completely f it up, like with the GTA Remastered trilogy. But we don't talk about those. Well, I will eventually, but not for now. So that got me thinking, what exactly do I want out of a remaster of the original God of War games? So just for shits and giggles, because I know that no self-respecting video game studio is ever gonna listen to me or anybody else on YouTube, I decided to make a wish list. Now, let me be clear here, I'm gonna be making this list based off things that could realistically happen. I'm not gonna make some ridiculous demand like making the final boss of God of War 2 a passionate lovemaking scene between Kratos and Zeus. Awesome as that would have been. I'm merely going to suggest changes and additions that could in theory actually happen based on what they're doing and what a remaster usually is and can do in an already finished game. Don't tone it down. Alright, now I don't want to come across as one of those people, if you know what I mean. I'm not one of those people who believe that gaming should be nothing more than just blood and tits for one specific demographic. Gaming is a medium, and like all mediums, can and does have an extremely varied output of artistic works. With that said, however, well, don't tone it down. I know that gaming audiences are more varied these days than they were in 2005, and as such, certain things would have more pushback if implemented these days. I mean, we know this because we've seen journalists say it for ages. But personally, I don't care. Because it's not about the contents of these games, it's about the artistic integrity. Which means, for good or for ill, I basically have to say, I don't want the gratuitous violence or the titties to be toned down. Not because I'm for or against these things, but more so for the sake of artistic integrity, because that's the original vision that the creators had, and that's how it should stay. That's the way a remaster should be, regardless of what specific subject of potential changes are. It's kind of like how I was a bit peeved that they decided to censor a bunch of stuff in the Reignited trilogy. Not because I support the idea of there being machine guns in a game rated E for everyone, but because it goes against the original artistic vision of the artist. And hey, you can argue about whether or not it's a stupid vision to begin with, but it's a vision nonetheless, and I don't want that downplayed or eliminated under any circumstances in a remaster. So when it comes to the base content in these games, the exact thing that exists within the game from the intro to the credits, I don't want them to change anything that's quote-unquote controversial. Because otherwise, if you don't maintain the artistic vision, the remaster is basically worthless. The only circumstance under which I would tolerate these games being toned down would be an optional, keyword optional, streamer or content creator mode. Because these games are a notorious pain in the ass when it comes to making content for because of all the blood and nudity. So maybe if they had an optional mode that does all the work for us and censoring all the things that wouldn't fly on YouTube and whatnot, I would be okay with that. But only if it's optional. Challenge modes, if possible. This one might be a little bit more unreasonable because I'm not sure to what degree they're able to edit the existing games, and quite frankly, I don't know how game development works at the best of times, so I'm putting this pretty near the bottom, but I would like some extra challenge modes. Because here's the thing, I've played a lot of God of War, and chances are if you're watching this, you have too. And personally, I would like the games to have something new for those of us who have played these games many times. Specifically, I'm thinking of something like the Nintendo Remix games, where they put you into a specific level or a specific part of a game and give you a little challenge to do. I would like something along the lines of that. Give us unique challenges that we wouldn't otherwise get in specific parts of specific games. Make a little game out of it. They kind of do that with the Challenge of the Gods mode that are only available in 2 games, but how cool would something like that be, but with like a roulette-style presentation where you get random challenges and random games within the series? Failing that, I would at least like a version of the Challenge of the Gods put into every game in the series, if only because I feel like that would be a little bit more of a reasonable request. All available BTS content. If there's something that remakes and remasters are good for, it's including the behind-the-scenes material, concept art, documentaries, model viewers, and so on and so on and so on. Basically, whatever they have available to put as far as behind-the-scenes content, I want it all. They do tend to have some behind-the-scenes material. Hell, God of War 2 on PS2 came pre-packaged with a making-of documentary, which was really good. Whatever they have, I want to see it, and as a matter of fact, I remember seeing in the documentary back in the day that there were certain levels that were modeled but were eventually cut. It would be really cool as part of the behind-the-scenes content to have sort of a museum mode to be able to walk around these cut levels and see what's what. Like I said, any and all available BTS content should be there, because that's one thing a remake or a remaster should always do. Include Betrayal. This one probably won't take much work to do, but if they are remastering the entire original line of games, then they damn sure should include the forgotten God of War game, that of course being Betrayal. The relatively forgotten mobile phone in-between quill of God of War 1 and 2. If not for emulation, this game would have been lost media, and while it's not really worth playing all that much these days outside of the novelty, for the sake of at least preserving it and giving fans a background on one of the more forgotten pieces of God of War history, I say they should include Betrayal. Otherwise, it's not really a complete archive. New Game Plus for the games that don't have it. Some games in the series have a New Game Plus, others do not, particularly the first and third games, which could use a New Game Plus if you ask me. I mean, come on, unless you cheese the game, there's no good way to get enough red orbs together to upgrade all your weapons all the way until the very end. By that point, it's already too late to experience the best of your fully upgraded arsenal. In fairness, if they didn't add a New Game Plus to the original remaster of God of War 3, there's probably not much of a chance that they can do it now, but a man can dream. However, there's no reason they can't add some sort of New Game Plus function to the original. I think anyway. Skippable cutscenes. Okay, so sometimes in these games you can skip cutscenes, sometimes you can only skip after you die once, and sometimes you can't skip at all. It's actually something that the series is sort of notorious for, or at least was for a time, being unable to skip at some points. And as somebody who's played these games a lot, sometimes I just want to jump in without having to watch the same cutscenes I've watched 100 times. So I would like them to add the ability to skip every cutscene regardless of which one, and regardless of the context. Really nothing more to it than that, it's just that unskippable cutscenes are something that have gone out of fashion for a reason. Sometimes in certain situations you just don't want to bother. Universal game mechanics. Implementing universal game mechanics would more or less only affect 2 games. You have the first game as well as Ascension. Now, given that Ascension is a PS3 game that can barely be emulated on modern systems, I'm not sure how feasible it is to change anything in that case or even have it included in the bundle. Because hey, since it hasn't been officially announced, we don't know what games will be included and the rumors are basically meaningless. But if possible, I would like to see it, but even if the only one they can alter in any way is the first game, I would still be fine with that, because there are some aspects of the first game that are kind of annoying, such as the inability to slide down climbable walls, despite the fact that you can climb in any other direction quickly, or the fact that the Rage of the Gods mode is only usable when the meter is full and you can't turn it off and on. Which, as tends to be the case with ultra-powerful buffs like that, you end up saving it for an impossible fight that never comes. Basically, there's just a lot of quality of life features and mechanics that were added into later games that weren't there in the first game or even the second game in some cases. And if possible, I would like for all the same quality of life features to exist in every game. Now, I wouldn't want, say, Athena's blades to have the same attacks as the Blades of Chaos or vice versa, because that eliminates the specialness and uniqueness of each game. More so, I'm discussing the smaller mechanics that, while small, make all the difference. With the exception of Ascension, because if possible, I would like for that game to at least have a toggleable option to have the gameplay be akin to the other games, because they tried to experiment and the experiments really didn't work out that well, hence why that game's been universally my least favorite of the original 6 games. A skip function or a rewind function. Okay, so as much as I love this series, there's no doubt in my mind that there are some pretty wretched parts. You can see my video about the best and worst parts of every God of War game to find out what I'm talking about. In particular, there are at least a few sections of the original God of War game that I dread doing every time, despite the fact that I've played that game like 10 times. Like the balancing beams or the bladed cylinder climbing in the underworld. And there are other rather frustrating parts in the other games, the Trial of Archimedes, this one part in God of War 2, that final chunk of fights before the final boss in God of War 3, and so on. Yeah, I can get through these, as I always have, but I don't think there's any doubt in anyone's mind that there are certain parts of every game that they dread going through, and if you happen to fail a couple of times, we always get that incredibly condescending message. Switch to easy mode? Hell no. Especially if easy mode is entirely based around combat and the thing I'm doing is not based around combat. So basically, if you literally can't be asked, why not have a skip function for more frustrating parts of the games? Or possibly a rewind function so you can more quickly undo mistakes. And if you don't want to do that, I don't know, maybe at the very least make the easy mode actually make the non-combat challenges easier? In fact, make all the non-combat challenges relative to the actual difficulty. I mean, I still wouldn't indulge in easy mode in that case because I'd stick a toothpick under my big toenail and kick a wall before playing these games on easy mode. But at the very least, people with less shame than I do would have an easier time, and it would also give a more stimulating difficulty to the people playing on higher difficulties. A designated original graphics button. Now, when it comes to any hypothetical remaster of these games, we really don't know to what extent they're going to be remastering the graphics. Perhaps they would want to make the games on the same graphical level as God of War 3 or Ascension, or perhaps they would take the older games and try to do what the Tomb Raider remaster did and give it a fresh coat of paint that looks good, but doesn't necessarily make the game look as high fidelity as most modern AAA games. Hypothetically, if it is Santa Monica making this, then I would probably expect them to go above and beyond because that's kind of their MO. But regardless of how high fidelity they want to make a hypothetical remaster, I would want what all good remasters have, a designated original graphics button. Because if there's one thing that I think all remasters have in common, they do in some way show us exactly how far we've come. And that's why I always appreciate the remasters that give you the option to see how far we've come at the click of a button. Plus, it also lets you experience the game as it was originally intended if you choose to do so, essentially giving you a shot-for-shot re-release on top of the remaster. Despite being a bit of a no-brainer feature, this is something that not a lot of remasters do, and I think it should be a default feature. If you're not going to at least include the original version on the disc, at least give us an option to switch to something that looks like the original version on the fly. I don't think that should be too much to ask for, and that's the biggest change I want in any of these games, in any of the remasters, in anything really. I don't think that should be too much to ask for, but that right there, that is the biggest change I want in the remaster. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Okay, on the surface, the phrase, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, may seem quite similar to don't tone it down, but it's not really. When I say don't tone it down, I'm referring to the subject matter that may not necessarily fly if the series started today. Talking about if it ain't broke, don't fix it is referring to more so the general game design, because there's a lot of different aspects that made us fall in love with the series, and while there are certainly things not to like, there are many things to love. The smooth action, enemy variety, spectacular boss fights and set pieces, you name it. There's a lot of things that are just as good right now as they were back when these games came out, and I would hate for things that don't need to be changed to be changed. So at the end of the day, if it ain't broke, just don't fix it. Although I'm not entirely sure what we really need to worry about if it is a shot-for-shot remaster, because like I said, I'm not sure how much can really be changed. But I would still hate to see something be changed that doesn't need to be changed. Alright, and that's my wish list for the God of War series remaster, which still may or may not be actually happening. All things which I see as relatively reasonable, but may or may not be reasonable, depending on various factors, but I guess that remains to be seen. And besides, it's not like my wish list is going to be seen by any of the actual developers, even if it comes down to that. If it is happening, I am genuinely curious to see who would be making it, because the obvious choice is Bluepoint Games, seeing as they haven't released anything since 2020, but then again, last I heard they were making an original game. But I guess there's no reason they can't do both, in theory anyway. Like I said, I'm not super in tune with how games are made outside of what you see in behind the scenes content, so what are you gonna do? Still, that's that, and I'm curious what you guys think. What are your reasonable requests? Let me know in the comment section below, and if you like this video, be sure to leave a like, subscribe, and hit the notification icon so you're always up to date on what I'm doing. I've been the King of Snark Style right here on Tactical Bacon Productions, and I will see you next time. Stay crispy, my friends.